Hello and welcome to the second part of the Excel training module. Right now we're going to go over the if function. The if function is a pretty often used function. It's extremely popular just because there's so many applications for it. Simply put, the if function is a comparison function. It's if a value is a certain number that you designate, then it's true. If it's not, it's false. And that true and false can be replaced by all sorts of other data that you could plug in. We're also going to go over a nested if function in a few minutes, which is a more advanced version of the if function. So let's jump into first what would I use an if function for? What are some scenarios? Well, one of the scenarios I could use is grading on a pass or fail. Let's say you have students and there is no A or B or C. It's either you pass or you don't. Certain training is very often with that. You get a certification and you have to get a certain value. Otherwise, you have to take the test over. Projects, due date tracking, converting scores to grades, quota tracking, lots of different uses. So let's see how it works. So let's say in this scenario you're a teacher. You could be a trainer, and this is some sort of certification or regular annual or biannual test that they have to take where they either pass or they fail. And within this, I don't know why you are gray, we're just going to white you out, Mr. Bradford. So what we're going to do is we're going to base this off of these scores that they have. And if they happen to be, let's change this to 74, because the whole idea is that to pass, they'd want a 75. So that means that based off of this, a 74 or lower is a fail. A 75 or higher, they pass. And so we could see like that changed this one here to a passing grade. So we're going to wipe this out. So left mouse, drag, select, and just clear these contents. And the same as usual, we only have to do that first one, and then we could set up the other ones. We don't have to set up all of them one by one. So I'm going to double click in this one, and for this one, we're just going to use the insert function. And remember right here, we can actually plug in, if we know the function we're going for, we can just type it in and say go, and then it shows up. There it is right there. And it gives me what the definition is. And now it's asking, well, if what? Well, suppose I say, well, if this score here from C6 is greater than F6, then it's going to be, and I put in quotes. Anytime, here's a little thing, anytime you actually put in text and you want it to be text and not a part of the actual formula, you put it in quotes and it kind of ignores it as being a part of the actual formula itself. It just says, oh, this is text, and it's going to leave it alone. So for my true, if it's greater than F6, then it's going to be a P, or I could type in pass, right? If it isn't greater than that, which is false, it is not greater than F6, then in quotes we'd put an F, and we would say it's a fail, right? And I just hit OK. So we can see that's 85. I get a P. If I put a 65, it's an F. If I put a 75, it's a pass. So we can see that it's working the way we want. Anything above a 74 is going to be a passing grade. Now, the same as before, whereas if I just drag this down by that little corner, these aren't going to be very accurate. That 45 should not be a passing grade, but that is because I dragged it down and it's just doing that thing we talked about with the VLOOKUP where it's moving, it's adding a value to each of these, just like it did for over here, looking at the different values. It's looking below this value I have here when it doesn't need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo, Control Z, and I'm going to go back into this formula. And I can do this a few different ways. I can either just manually type it in, or I could hit F4 when I'm in the blue section for this blue cell. Go to the red cell, F6, and hit F4. So the F4 on the top of my keyboard automatically puts in these dollar signs for me. And remember, those dollar signs, just like we did in VLOOKUP, tells you that I don't want this to move. It's all, even though I'm dragging down and it's going to change the value of each of these, looking at what it's looking at, what its comparison is stays the same. And actually, you know what? I'm going to undo that, hit F4 again on this one because I actually don't need it here. I just need it on this one. So only in the red are we going to do that. So now, if I drag this down, so once again, I only did it in the red section. I got rid of it in the blue section. And that was by hitting F4, just deleting those dollar signs out of the blue section. It's only in the red, and we can see the red is highlighted in this value here. Now, if I just drag that down, that should be accurate. And I would know that by just double clicking, and any of these I double click, you notice it changes where it's looking from, and what it's comparing it to stays the same. And I press enter just to keep that. So now we have this nice function that's basically just set up that it's doing just that. Now, this one, we can call this one a little extra credit. This is the nested one. And what is a nested? A nested is basically the same thing. It's just that you can kind of keep going. Instead of saying if it's this value, it's yes. If it's not, it's no. You can say in this particular case, oh, if something is greater than this value, then it's an A. If it's equal to it, it's a B. And if it's less, it's C. And I could actually keep on going. It can get pretty complicated. But how would I use it? A lot of the same, just more intricate. Grading, tracking, converting scores to grades, to-do list. This is also really good for when we're talking tracking and projecting task of when somebody is supposed to turn in something and it's late, or it's on time, or it's early, and you have a grading system based off of that. So if I go nested, here, in this scenario, let's say it's a project or an assignment. You have some people who are supposed to do training at your job. You have students who are supposed to turn in their work at a certain time. I type in what the due date is going to be, when I'd set it, and then as the students or the projects, the employees turn in their whatever it is they're working on, we plug in when they did it. And based on a comparison of these two dates, whether it's before the due date, on the day of the due date, or after the due date, it's either going to give one of these different answers. If it's earlier, then it was completed early. If it's equal to the due date, then it's on time. And if it's later than the due date designated, then it's late. So this one's a little more complicated, but it's the exact same idea. And this one we're actually going to type in. We're going to be hardcore with this one. So we're going to grab these, and I'm just going to clear these out. And let's just start with the top one. Now these I could put in whatever dates I want. Right now I'm just going to keep these that I have in here. So I type in, and I could use the insert function. I'm actually just going to type this one in, and you guys will have this in one of your sheets, a reference of the way it should work, but let me explain it. You start off with equals, and that tells the function that this is indeed going to start an actual function, a formula. So in this case, equals if. And then the way I start to nest it, nesting means putting something inside of something else, is I'm going to do a parentheses, and I'm going to start to go through this. So, in other words, if this value, and I just click on it and it puts it in there, is less than the due date, comma, and remember what the quotes do. The quotes are what the text is. So if it is less than, in other words, if it is before the due date, then I'm going to put in quotes that this is completed early, end quote. Now for the next if statement, comma, if, parentheses, this, the turned in date is equal to the due date, then you're going to say, in quotes, on time. And then so comma again. Oops, to make sure that doesn't look like. There we go. Make sure those are commas. It's one thing with the scripts. If anything is off, it'll be a little weird. If parenthesis, the turned in date is actually greater, in other words, later than the due date, comma, then we will call this one late. Put that in capitals, make it really important. And so the way it's working out is essentially I have if, judging off of these, if the turn-in date is before the due date, then it's completed early. If the turn-in date is on the same day, it's on time. And if the turn-in is later, greater than the due date, then it's late. Now, the one thing you notice with every single one of these, I have parentheses. I only need the equals in the front to start the function. That's just a comparative equal sign. It's not starting the function. It's just between these two. And at the end, here's the little tricky part. Count how many parentheses you have. 1, 2, 3. And at the end, I close it with 1, 2, 3 parentheses. And press enter. Now, we could see completed early. But if I change the year, let's say this guy was really late, and we made it 2017, then it's late. Now, because this one doesn't need a lockdown because there's different values, I can just drag it down and we could see that it works great. And if I actually were to make one, see 10/1/2016, 10/1/2016, that one's on time. This one is late. This one is early. And this one is really effective for tracking. And just as a bonus, I'm going to toss in one little extra that if you do on your evaluation, you can get some extra credit and brownie points for. You don't have to do it, but just a little fun thing, and this will be really helpful to anybody who's going to be doing any Excel work and organizing things. And that is, suppose I have a whole large list of projects or like 100 students, and I want to prioritize the students who actually are late. We have to talk to them first. The ones who are early and on time, I don't have to worry about that much, but those late ones, looking at a sea of instead of 3, but like 100 students, that could really take some time trying to find out who's late just by glancing at the text. So it'd be really nice to have it that it just pops out like with a color so I can immediately organize and find out which ones I need to go to. So this one's a super simple one, but it's a nice little added bonus I'm going to throw in for you. We go to this one. We are under Home, and we use Conditional Formatting. And we're going to set what's called a rule. And a rule is basically just saying when something happens that I say, it's going to change how this cell is formatted. Now, in actuality, let me just do it to all of these. Select them. Conditional Formatting, New Rule. And I'm going to go to Format only the cells that contain specified text. So format only the cells that contain specified text, and that specified text is going to be the word late, because I want to highlight those because those are the people I need to talk to. And the way I'm going to stand that out is I'm going to format that. And I'm going to say I want those letters to be in bold, and I want to fill that box with a bright orange so that on a sea of 100 students or 100 employees, I can immediately find that. And boom. So whenever I have 100 employees and I see, whoa, that person's late, I got to put them on the top of my to-do list to talk to so we can get this taken care of. And once again, that was just going through the Home, Conditional Formatting, Rule. And I just listed it that anytime I see the word late, it's ignoring the formula, it's just looking at the output. Then it's going to highlight this cell. So in other words, if I said, wow, this guy's a year late, then boom, he's late too. And that'll be really easy to spot. So that's a little bonus to this Excel. Hope you like it.